Hi and welcome to Carolina Crafting. I'm Tipper Presley. I'm filling in for Jackie today. Her husband Casper is having surgery and we all wish him well and a speedy recovery. Today we're here to visit with Pat Siler. She's a potter and the name of her studio is Creek Pottery. And we're here and she's going to show us some different techniques and show us some of the items that she makes. We're in Pat's studio now and she's going to show us how to make birdhouses, I believe.
Okay. I've started with a slab that I rolled out earlier. This is my slab roller, and it's best to let the slab rest a little while and some of the moisture get out of the clay. I have to score the edges just so we can get a good joint, and I use what we call slip and roll the birdhouse over and join it. In the beginning, I used to use this around a form, but I make so many now that I can do it without a form. And I'm sealing my edges.
And the scoring and the slip is just
it's almost like glue. It's
gluing it
together. And the scoring would be like sanding a wall before putting paint on it. It just helps it adhere better. And I've got my seam formed there, and I come out and form the outside so I will have a cleaner seam. I will clean it up more later. Once this dries, I can sand it and get this done hurriedly. Then I have to put a bottom in it. Now we're going to prepare the bottom to put on the birdhouse. I've got a special tool.
What is your special tool?
My special tool is usually the lid off of chapstick. If I can't find that, I will use the lid off of anything. So we have many things in the house without lids. I cut a hole, and then I put the base on here so I'll know just how big to cut my base. Around the bottom of the birdhouse just to get the size of the birdhouse. And then I'll cut the bottom just a little bit bigger, because I still have to attach it to the birdhouse. And then this clay I throw away. Well, I don't throw it away, I recycle it, which is what all my mushrooms are made from. I center the birdhouse on the base, and supporting the inside, I take the base and push it up around the bottom, forming what will be one piece of clay between the top and the bottom. And I go all the way around, work the clay around, get my bottom like I want it. In the end, when this is dry, I will sand it and it'll have a nicer, smoother appearance.
When you do the sanding, is it after the piece has been fired or before?
It's before. Once this clay dries to a hard stage, it's very brittle, dry clay, and I can sand it then. And we use just a common kitchen scrubby pad to sand with. And that gets all my edges smooth, gets out any little burrs, gets out any imperfections in the clay, and then we'll be ready to paint. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to cut the hole for the bird, to the little door, and then I'll use my special tool again on the sides, and I always run a rope between the birdhouse and the lid, because the lid just sits on the birdhouse. I fire it and the glazes melt together, which holds it, but once in a while the lids do come off, and this way I've got a string holding the birdhouse to the lid, and it's all one piece, and it just makes things more secure. My next special tool is my grandmother's biscuit cutter, and I have to cut a hole for the door for the bird. So these birdhouses are made for small birds, wrens, little chickadees and things like that. I think they're probably squirrel proof because they can't chew through the clay. But once we do that, then I can take a wet sponge and smooth this out some. I don't want to wet the clay much. I finish up my base, and then I sit it back to dry.
How long does it have to dry before you're able to do your sanding and
It depends on the weather. If we have a lot of humidity, it may take several days for it to dry. Try not to dry them too fast because that will cause the clay to crack. A slow drying is better. And I paint the design on these while, this is called greenware, I paint the design on these while it is in the greenware stage instead of after it is bisque fired. Once I get the paint on, then we put it in a kiln and fire it to a cone 04 to 06 and bisque fire it, which takes the water out of the clay and makes it ready to take on the glaze.
Is it typical that you paint the design before the bisque fire, or do other people
It
do
is.
that?
Other artists paint in different stages. I find it's easier for me to paint greenware because it's easier to erase my mistakes. Once I paint it on bisque, it soaks into the clay a little bit more, and it's a little bit harder to correct my mistakes. So there have been times when I've painted a whole birdhouse and didn't like it, and I sanded it all off and started over again. So there are different ways to do it, and that's just the way I choose. Of course, they're more fragile that way, so I can be transporting them because I do a lot of painting at night in front of the TV, and I can bump into a wall or a door jamb or anything and break one, so you run the risk of having to deal with the fragile clay. But generally, I do all my painting in the greenware stage. Once in a while, if I need to, I can touch it up once it's been bisque fired. Now we're going to put the lid on the birdhouse. I've already pre-cut the slab into the shape, and I freehand cut this. I don't measure anything. I just guess at the size of the birdhouse, so my lid will definitely overlap the edge of the birdhouse. Then I pre-cut my lid, and I put it on to where the holes will line up with the sides. And then I always like my lids to look a little different, and I curl up the edges. I may curl some up and some down, and really droop some down. And then I let this rest a little bit. But this birdhouse, the lid is now molded to the birdhouse, and it should fit rather snugly. And especially after I glaze it, and the glaze melts the lid and the bottom together. But that way, when I'm finished, I can run a string through here and through the lid, and I've got my two pieces held together. So the next thing I can do is to decorate the birdhouse. For some of the things I just paint, I leave it alone at this stage, let it dry, and then I just paint a design on. For other things I do, I can put on flowers or anything. I've done some with frogs and lizards and snakes and little birds and things like that, flower blossoms. But I've got one in particular that I paint up with red and white checks, and I put little ants made out of polymer clay on the top, and then use a spoon for the rest, and that's our picnic birdhouse. There again, I don't have any to show today. All I've got to show today are my college birdhouses. And at this stage, if I were using this for a college birdhouse, I would stop here, let it dry, and then paint it with whatever logos I choose. But as I said, today I'm going to attach some flowers to this, hopefully, and then I'll paint it up and have flowers on the side. Today I'm going to be putting on some iris blossoms for this birdhouse, and I just freehand cut the petals. And of course I rolled this slab earlier this morning so it would dry out a little bit and it would be a little easier to work with. If the clay's too wet, it won't hold its shape very well. And while this looks like waste clay, it's not entirely wasted. I recycle it all and use it down to the last scrap. So once again, we're going to be scoring and slipping. I have to make a stem for my flower and put it on first, and then I'll build my petals around that. I'm going to score the stem and put some slip on it. And I'm going to score my birdhouse so we'll have a good fit. And that's the stem to my flower. From that I'll build with the petals and build with the leaves. So I'm going to score my petals, add a little slip, and mush that down. Score this side. Fingers are still wet so I can go on with the slip and attach it to the birdhouse there. I'll put on the next petal and attach it to the birdhouse. And more slip. And attach this petal to the birdhouse. And that's the top of the flower. It's what they call slip or magic water to attach pottery with. This is a bucket of clay that I've been working in, so some of the fine particles have dropped to the bottom, and it forms a thick kind of doughy, gluey type substance. And we put that on here, and it's just like glue, like I said before, holding it to the birdhouse. There's a petal, and I will get some more. And there's a flower petal. And then I will go back and clean up all these little lines so they'll be nice to look at. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I need to make leaves for the flower. And once again, my everything I do is freeform. So this is a facsimile of an iris, but irises have big old long leaves. And we're going to give this guy a couple, hopefully. And later on, I will clean up the edges of all of this so it will be smoother. Once again, I go for my slip, and I need to score my birdhouse on this. I don't know where the top is going to land, so I like to have some dimension to my birdhouses, so I'll, instead of keeping everything nice and flat, I like to poof it out a little bit. I don't know if that's a good word or not, but
It also makes it look more realistic, three-dimensional.
right. And I'm going to cut this leaf down a little bit because I've got something else in mind for him. I'm going to score the back, go to my slip, and score the base down here. And I'm going to try to work this leaf out to where I can make a perch for the bird. And I'm going to have to refine that a little bit because it will have to be sanded. But this will give the little bird something to perch on.
Very neat.
And there it is. Once this has had time to set up a little bit, I may go back and refine the leaves a little bit. This looks a little bit large to me. I may cut it down. Keep it next to the birdhouse a little bit better, but I can work with it more.
Pat makes all different kinds of pottery, lots of different items, but one of her most popular are the mushrooms, and there's real interesting technique and just the whole story of how you make them. Will you share that with us?
I will. My mushrooms came about with a need for me to use waste clay, and I started just mushing out little mushrooms by hand. And then someone showed me a mushroom that they had found somewhere in another state and brought it to me. And I didn't quite like the design that I saw, so I changed it and made it into a two-part item. So I recycle my clay, the trimmings from my pots and things, and put them in a bucket, let them dry out real good, and then I put water on it and let it slake down. And once that happens, I can take it out and pour it on a plaster slab, and that draws the water out of it. When enough water is out, I can wedge the clay, or knead it, kind of like dough, wedge it back together, and that's what I make my mushrooms out of. So they're all out of recycled clay, and I feel like I'm just not throwing all that back into the environment. I take a half circle of clay, and I push my sides together, and then smooth the edges so I won't have a seam that shows. Then I go to the inside and smooth the seam inside. And there again, I try to smooth that out. And then I form the crown and smoothen the clay the whole time. Then I'll sponge this off. There goes my leaf on the birdhouse. Then I'll sponge this off and let it dry. And once again, I paint these before I fire them. And these the paints on these mushrooms have crystals in them that melt. So there again, I never know how the glaze is going to look. It's always different. The mushrooms vary because they're every one of them's hand formed. So they may vary a little in size or shape, or sometimes I may ruffle out the edges. It's just whatever I feel like doing that day is what I do. But we make a lot of mushrooms. My husband helps me make the stems. We extrude them out of an extruder, and he's got the muscle power to do that. So we made many stems this winter. We've made even more this week, but the mushrooms do vary.
The extruder that you were talking about, what is that?
It's almost like a caulk gun. It's made for clay, and my husband, we pack it full of clay, and then he just squeezes it, and it compresses the clay and pushes it out a die in the end. And so they're all formed about this big around, and then I twirl them into different shapes for mushroom stems. The colors of the clay vary, so I may have some light stems and some dark. I try to use more of a red clay for that and use the white clay for the tops. But there again, it's all recycled clay, so I may even get some clay that has light and dark in it.
But that would give them a more natural appearance.
It does.
And
people like any and all kind. They like them with the crystals on them. They like bright blue. They like red. They like brown for the more natural. So it's just different people's preferences. And they may take 5 minutes to pick one out. I've had a lady that took up to an hour to pick out 3, so they just have to match just right sometimes. But we spend a lot of good time together making stems and mushrooms, and then we go to our shows, and they seem to be one of the most popular things we have.
I really enjoyed my visit with Pat today. I learned a lot about pottery. Jackie will be back for the next episode, and I hope you join us for the next Carolina Crafting episode.